So we kicked this off last week with this idea that you have a champion and that he is the champion for you, that Jesus is above every rival and he is for you in every single moment. And what I want to get into today is not just the idea that you have a champion who is for you, but that you are called to be a champion. Jesus calls us to live our lives like him, that our lives will be modeled after him. And in this powerful moment, he even tells his disciples, he says, well, what you see me doing, you're going to do greater things than these. And so when we see the acts of Jesus on our behalf, we're not simply meant to see these and go, okay, that was good. Let's move on. We're supposed to see them and say, how can this be true in my own life? And I think this is maybe more important now than at any other time. I was listening to an interview with business author Patrick Lencioni this past week, and this is the comment that he made. He said, your fear goes down when you're helping others. That your fear goes down when you're helping others. And if you find yourself right now in a spot of anxiety, if you're in a spot of fear, one of the greatest things that you can do is acts on behalf of someone else, to be someone else's champion, to be for them, to act on their behalf. And today I want to show you how you do that. Today I want to show you what that looks like in your life. And so we actually have two titles for the message this morning. The first title of the message is The Captain. And that'll make sense why we're calling it The Captain in just a second, because we're looking at the life of David. But the second title that I kind of messed with for a while is What David Sees. And so we're calling today The Captain, and I want to know what David sees, because there's something significant about David that enables him to act on behalf of others that we often miss. And we're going to look at a number of different passages today in David's life, but I want to start in 1 Samuel chapter 22. And it gives this account of David. It says, so David left Gath and escaped to the cave of Adullam. Soon his brothers and all his other relatives joined him there. Then others began coming, men who were in trouble or in debt, or who were just discontented, until David was the captain of about 400 men. David was the captain of about 400 men. And it's important to note in David's life where David had been before he ends up in this cave of Adullam. David starts out from simple roots. He's a shepherd that is somewhat forgotten, that when all his brothers go off to war, he's left behind just to tend the sheep. This is the same David that kills Goliath, like the story that everyone knows about. The same David that kills Goliath. The part, if you have very small children in the room, cover their ears. Like we talk about David as he's just this like mild guy. He tends sheep. He plays the harp. Like, I don't know what harp players look like. We are yet to have a harp player here on our stage. If you play harp, contact us. Like, we're in. But like, we get this idea like the sheep tender, the harp player is not really like a macho picture most of the time. Sheep player, harp, or sheep tender, harp player. But David, when he kills Goliath, he actually takes Goliath's sword, earmuffs children, cuts off his head with Goliath's own sword, and then holds it up. Like David's the man. Like, that's cool. I don't know many harp players who also are beheaders at the same time. And so David has this like rise to significance. And David, actually, he's in the army. He marries the king's daughter. He is placed as the captain of the king's bodyguard. The captain of the king's bodyguard. And then things go south. And the king all of a sudden becomes jealous of David. And the king all of a sudden is upset that David is getting more attention than the king is. And so the king decides that he needs to kill David. And so he starts chasing after David. And one day while David is playing the harp in the king's court, is this how Is this how you play the harp? Does this seems like a similar harp pose? Okay, good. And so while David's playing the harp, King Saul gets up and takes the spear and tries to pin David against the wall with the spear. And it's at this point in time, the wisdom of David spoke out and he said, I should leave. I should go. Now I know it's time for me to go. And so the man who killed the giant, who is the captain of the king's bodyguard. The captain of the king's bodyguard finds himself here. And this is the description in 1 Samuel chapter 22, verse 2. It says, after it says his brothers and all his other relatives joined him there, then others began coming, men who were in trouble or in debt or who were just discontented. In trouble, in debt, or just discontented. And he was the captain, the captain of those who were in trouble, who were in debt, who were discontented. I think I go with the sheep. He was the captain of the guys. Like, I don't know if have you ever gotten on a team and you're like, we're gonna lose. Like we're gonna lose. Like we're gonna have fun, but I promise you we're bad. That's David. Like David, literally, it says the only person who might be worthwhile who's following him is his mom. Like that's it. And I've felt that, like I've put out a Facebook post and no one likes it, and I check back 10 hours later and it's got one like. Mom, like the only person who's following you who isn't in trouble or in debt or just discontented is your relatives. But it says David is the captain of the king's bodyguard, the captain of his family and the people who no one else wanted. This is David. And it may look in this moment as you go, wow, that is nothing, that is worthless. But I want you to see throughout the day today that God uses small starts. God uses simple things. God uses very, very imperfect scenarios. And the start of a movement for the future king of Israel, you would not expect would be in a cave with 400 lowlifes and your relatives. And the lowlifes and relatives in your life may feel like a cross-section in your own mind. That's for you to figure out on your own. Don't say that if they're sitting next to you right now, okay? Just keep that to yourself. But you may feel like you're in a scenario in which God isn't going to be able to do anything with. But God uses small starts. God uses imperfect scenarios. David is, we describe it like this on our team, David is in the dip. He's smack dab in the middle of the dip. This is the dip. This is how we describe the dip on our team. The dip is that process that when you start out, there's that like initial enthusiasm. There's that initial excitement. Everything seems to be going well at the start. Everything seems to be working. You can't miss. But then after a little period of time, things get hard. And you're working just as hard as you were back here, and yet you're not seeing the results that you wanted to see. The dip is that spot in life in which it is harder than you had hoped for. You expected the line just to go up and just to keep moving and just to keep rising, but all of a sudden you hit this spot in your life in which it's hard and everything is a grind and every conversation with your child is difficult and everything you try to do at your work just meets friction and every step you take forward in your faith feels forced. You're in the middle of the dip, and it's easy when you're here. It's easy when you're in this moment to think that something is wrong with you, to think that you blew it, to think that you did something that you weren't supposed to do. It is easy when you're here in the dip to think that God left you. You see, everybody celebrates, praises God right here, right? Like we clap, we rejoice, we celebrate. And then we get here and we go, God, where did you go? God, what on earth happened? But I want you to know today, every journey worth taking has a dip. Every spot in your life has a moment. Everything that is worth doing has a moment in which it feels harder than you thought it was going to be. It feels more difficult than you anticipated that it was going to be. Everything you go through that is worth going through has a dip that you have to walk through. And if you're going to get to where you want to be, you need to start where you are. If you're going to get to where you want to be, if you're going to do what you feel called to do, you need to start not where you wish you were, not where you thought God was going to have you, not where you thought you were. You need to start where you are in this moment. See, this is what I found as we look at the dip. Everyone celebrates this. Like we feel good here, but everyone celebrates this. No one quits the marathon at mile 25 because you can see the finish line. No one quits the race once the finish line is in view. No. We quit here. We quit when it's at its hardest. But the character that is formed, the strength that is gained, the faith that is needed is formed within the struggle. It is the trial and hardship of life that shapes you and molds you into the person that you need to become. And what I have found more than anything else is that it's in the dip that God does his greatest calling on people's lives. It's within the dip. It's within the struggle. It is when God's voice is most easily heard and his purpose for your life becomes most apparent. Because in the comfort, you're not looking. When life is easy, when everything is fine, when you're going about your hurried, busy, routine life and doing all the things that you usually do and you want to do, like that's not when people hear from God. That's not when people redefine the purpose for their lives. That's not when people all of a sudden have a new sense of calling, of purpose on their life. No. It's not within comfort that God calls. It's within crisis. It's not within comfort that God leads someone into a better place and leads someone into deeper purpose. It's within crisis. It's when things seem to be at their worst. And we envy David when he's the captain of the bodyguard. And we look down upon David and when he's the captain of those in debt and the discontent and just his relatives are willing to follow him. But David is willing to be the captain of the 400. He's willing to be the captain of just a few. And what we see is that David's story doesn't end there. David's story keeps moving. If you continue walking through the account in his life, what you're going to find in just a little bit. In 1 Samuel chapter 23, verse 1. It says this: one day news came to David that the Philistines were at Keilah, stealing grain from the threshing floor. And the Philistines were the Israelites' mortal enemies, stealing grain. David asked the Lord, should I go and attack them? Yes, go and save Keilah, the Lord told him. But David's men said, we're afraid. Even here in Judah, could we just pause right here for a second? Is it not bad enough that it's the discontent, the debt, those in trouble, and his mom? They're also scared. This is his crew. We're afraid. They didn't even make an excuse. I would make an excuse. I would at least have within there, I'm busy, my hip hurts, so that they just go, hey, we're scared. We're afraid even here in Judah. We certainly don't want to go to Keilah to fight the whole Philistine army. But they go. David goes back and he asks God and he says, should we go? And he said, absolutely, you should go. And so they go and they save the city. And then word comes to Saul and they know Saul's coming, and so they flee. And so Saul leaves. And what we find just a few verses later, it says, verse 13, so David and his men, about 600 of them now. There were 400, right? And now there's 600 of them now, left Keilah and began roaming the countryside. Word soon reached Saul that David had escaped, so he didn't go to Keilah. After all, David now stayed in the strongholds of the wilderness. He's from a cave to a stronghold. And David's adventure with the 600 doesn't end there. There's actually a couple different times, one in particular, in which David has a chance to kill Saul. In this one occurrence, David's men are hiding back in a cave, and Saul goes in with his army, and they're attempting to kill him. And Saul goes into the cave to use the restroom, because when there's no outhouses in your BC times, that's what you do. And he doesn't know David's in there. And David actually has a chance to kill him, but he doesn't, because he knows that God has placed Saul there and he wasn't going to do that. And so they keep going and they keep running and they go through all these different things. And David goes not with his 400 men, but now with his 600 men. And the group has increased, but over time it increases even more. In 2 Samuel, what has happened by now, if you flip over a few pages, if you're following along in your own Bible, in 2 Samuel, Saul has passed away and David is now king, the captain of those in debt, in trouble, his relatives. It says, then David, 2 Samuel 6 verse 1, then David again gathered all the elite troops in Israel, 30,000 in all. First there were 400 and then there were 600, and now there are 30,000 elite troops, not his relatives, elite troops. And then later on, at the end of 2 Samuel, in verse 23, it gives this description. This is verse 8. It says, these are the names of David's mightiest warriors. The first name was Jashobeam the Hakmonite's best word ever, who was the leader of the three mightiest warriors among David's men. He once used his spear to kill 800 enemy warriors in a single battle. And then one chapter later, this is 2 Samuel 24, verse 9. Joab, his general, reported the number of people to the king. There were 800,000 capable warriors in Israel who could handle a sword, and 500,000 in Judah. 1.3 million soldiers. And David is no longer the captain. David is now the king. But it didn't start at 1.3 million. Could we see the curve again? It didn't start at 1.3 million, because there were 1.3 million, and of the 1.3 million, there were 30 mighty warriors. One dude who killed 800 people with a spear at one time. Before the 1.3 million, there were 30,000 elite troops. Before the 30,000 elite troops, there were 600 who were with him, and before the 600 who were with him, there were 400 discontent and other relatives who were with him. And the point is this, is that David doesn't stop here. David doesn't quit his journey here. And when David is described as the captain here, he's not insulted by it, because he knows God uses small starts. He knows God uses imperfect scenarios. He knows God uses imperfect people to accomplish what he's doing, to fulfill his calling. See, David is the captain, not because of his significance, but because of how he sees things, because of how he views those around him. And my concern for you today is that you'll look at the scenario and circumstances of your life in this moment, in which for some of you, you have been cooped up in a house with the dual group of the discontent and your relatives for the past couple weeks. And it is easy within these moments to begin thinking that what you do doesn't matter, to begin thinking your actions don't have purpose, to begin thinking your life doesn't have meaning, doesn't have significance. But it's not within the comfort that God does his calling. It's within the crisis. The context of calling is crisis. It's difficulty. It's hardship. It's when things feel at their worst. And the decision that you must make today is that no matter where you are, that you're going to start where you are. That no matter what you're going through, you're not going to start where you wish you were, where you thought you were going to be, how you planned for your life to turn out, but where you are now. And it's easy to assume that because I'm not further along than I thought I was going to be, that is my excuse for not taking action in the present. That is my reason for not moving forward in the moment, for not making my faith greater than it was before, for not helping those around me because I can't help everyone, for not doing what I know I'm supposed to do because before I didn't do what I knew I was supposed to do. And no one quits the race because they don't like their lane. Like no one looks at the race that they were called to run and says, I'm not running it, I don't like what lane I'm in. You run the race that you were called in the lane that you're in because you're called to run that race. And I want you to know today, sitting on your couch, sitting in your bedroom, feeling like maybe the best moments of your life has passed you by and you don't know what you're doing in the moment. My calling to you today is to live like David, to be the captain when everything around you feels like chaos, and to run the race that is in front of you, to start now. Because you can't start last week, you can't fix last year, you can't fix 10 years ago, but you can start now to run the race that you are called to run with all the energy in which you are called to run, knowing that God is calling, knowing that God is leading, because it is in the crisis that God does his greatest calling. And I believe he is calling you today in this moment. Band, wherever you are, let's celebrate that now. It is in the crisis that God calls. It's in the difficulty that God moves. This description, I know it should be obvious from the text and what we've seen, but this description of the discontent, the in trouble, those in debt, David didn't write that. And I know that should be obvious because the book literally says 1 Samuel, and it would feel like a weird coincidence if David wrote 1 Samuel. He didn't. Okay, so there we go. Spoiler alert. David didn't write that. Someone else wrote it. Someone else put in the description that these were the discontent, those in trouble, and his relatives. It is how they are described, but not how they are described by David. And I want to show you because I wholeheartedly believe that David would have never described them that way. David would have never put down those characteristics of these people who followed him. And what we see is that David sees people differently than how we typically see them. David views people through a different lens than how most of us do. And I want to show you what David sees, because David sees something powerful. And we see two different examples of how powerful David sees things through God's eyes. And one of them actually comes in this account in which David is hiding in the cave. And so David, like Saul, who tried to spear him to the wall while he's playing the harp, who tried to, man, that's a whole nother level to spear someone while they're playing the harp. Like maybe drums, maybe bass guitar. Some people would be like, yeah, I get that. But the harp, he's harping, and they try to spear him to the wall. And so he's running for his life. And there's this occurrence, this crazy seeming coincidence in which of all the caves that David and his 600 men could hide him, and Saul really has to go, that he chooses to go into the cave that David is in to relieve himself. And so Saul goes into the cave. And I'm not going to detail out this description, but apparently he's there for a little while, okay? He's there because a conversation takes place, okay? You can fill in the blanks. I don't need to do that for you this morning. So he's there for a while. And it says David's men come up to him and they go, this is your moment. This is now. You're kill him now. And they even use spiritual language. They go, God is delivering him into your hand in this moment. And it's easy when opportunities align and opportunities to present themselves to assume that it's God delivering it into our hands, but sometimes it could be God testing us at this moment more than anything else. And David understands that for what it is. And so what takes place? It says 1 Samuel chapter 24, verse 4. David's men say, now's your opportunity. Now's your opportunity. Today, the Lord is telling you, I will certainly put your enemy into your power to do with as you wish. So David crept forward and cut off a piece of the hem of Saul's robe. Just a smidge. He creeps up because he's a good soldier. He's the captain of the bodyguard of the king's wife, creeps up. And he can't even bring himself to chop him down. He just cuts off a piece of the hem of Saul's robe. It says, but then David's conscience began bothering him because he had cut Saul's robe. He said to his men, the Lord forbid that I should do this to my Lord the king. I shouldn't attack the Lord's anointed one, for the Lord himself has chosen him. So David restrained his men and did not let them kill Saul. See, his greatest enemy, who was trying to kill him, David, can't even bring his hand up against him. He cuts off a piece of his robe and he goes, who am I? This is the one that God has placed here. It is not mine. It is not mine to do this. You go, David, why? Is it about Saul? Is it Saul that you're so infatuated with? Do you think that Saul's special? And the truth is it's not. It's not the fact that it's Saul. It's anyone. It's everyone. David writes these words that has been now imprinted and universalized on coffee cups and notebooks and significant lifetime memories like that everywhere. But they're words that should always be remembered. David writes these words in Psalm 139, verse 13 through 14. He says, for you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. There's this little piece at the ending there that, if I'm going to be honest, it sounds really arrogant of David. Like he's just talked about how he's been created. And then at the very end, he says, your works are wonderful. I know that full well. And the works that he's just been talking about has been himself. Like, I don't know if he's just like, man, parents, you guys make cute children. Like, you can say that to someone else's parents. You shouldn't say that to your parents. That's what it feels like David's doing in this moment. He goes, God, your works are you created me, and your works are wonderful. I know that. Oh, I know that. But within this, what we see, it's not how David sees Saul. It's not even how David sees David. It's how David knows God sees everyone. How God sees Saul, how God sees David, how God sees his 400 men who are described by others as the scum of society. No, it's how David sees them. David sees them through this lens. They are not accidentally there. They are created. They are not like loose atoms moving around. They are knit together. They are not accidental. They are not here by chance. He says, no, they are fearfully and wonderfully made by God. And because they are made by God, his works are wonderful. And David goes, I know that beyond a shadow of a doubt. I know your works are wonderful above all else. And this is where David gets his identity from. This is where David gets the cues on who he is more than anything else from. He says, it is because your works are wonderful that I can move forward, that I can, when I'm here with Saul, I know that he is your work as well. And when everyone else is whispering in my ear and they're going, this is your moment. This is your moment. He goes, no, his works are wonderful. I know that. I know that full well. See, when you understand that the value that God has placed on your life, you understand as well the value that God has placed on everyone else's life. When you see clearly in the same other boat, the value that God has placed on everyone else's life, you know clearly the value that God has placed on your life. And so when other people wanted to label these men and say they're discontent, they're troubled, they're no one, David doesn't label them because he knows they've already been labeled. David doesn't label them because he knows they have already been labeled by God. Here's the hard thing. Let me see. Do we have anyone here today? Good. You guys are good. Okay. There is like, you have nothing on your, it's just blank. It's just blank. So it was made by no one. Your shirt just mysteriously appeared out of thin air. Mark, you as well. Your shirt is blank. There is, okay, good. It just popped out of the air. My goodness, that's incredible. Dusty, this is lovely. You almost faded in because of the, camo shirt joke. Sorry, within there. But again, we don't look at this and we don't go, man, all these people's clothing, they came out of nowhere. They just popped out of nowhere. They're just accidental fabric that showed up in the earth. Isn't this an anomaly? Isn't this amazing? No, they're made by someone, right? They're made by someone. Here's a fascinating thing. It's actually a modern invention that the labels that we wear, that we want to signify the labels that we wear and put their logos on the outside. Because this is a new thing. This is a 21st century adaptation that we take the clothes that we wear and we go, hey, I want everyone to know who I'm wearing. And people go there, who are you wearing? We want to tell you like this. No, this is the label that I have. Because before them, what would happen is that they would take the nicest brands, the nicest clothing, the nicest quality, would never ever dare put their label in a spot that you could see. Because they thought it cheapened the clothing. They thought it made it less valuable by simply trying to mark their clothing with an outside label. What they did is they put the label on the inside. The label wasn't something there for everyone to see. The label was there on the inside. See, this is this side. This is what we all need to see. The label of your value is on the inside. The label of who you are, of why you were created, is not anywhere that anyone else can see. It's on the inside. It's deeper within you. It's created in your inmost being. It's knit together. It's not public. Your label, like your label, how you have been labeled, the value upon your life, it's on the inside. And what that means is your success does nothing to change your label. Your failure does nothing to change your label. Your difficult circumstances, your slow starts, your mistakes, your sins, your failures does nothing to change the label. And what happens is that if we look to those around us for our value, there is no amount of acceptance, approval, or accomplishment that will give us worth. If we look to our career, if we look to our projects, if we look to the things that we complete as the things that give us esteem in our life, then something's gonna happen like a global pandemic, and all of that is gonna be taken away in a moment, and we're gonna wander around and we're gonna go, why am I here? What am I doing? Why does this matter? Why is this worth anything? But what we need to nail down right now in this moment is the label is on the inside. The label is on the inside. Your value, your worth are inherent. They're part of the fact that you are created. No one can take it from you. You can't lose it in any way. There's nothing you can do that can lessen the value of your life. David looks at Saul and he says, created by God. David looks at himself and says, created by God. David looks at you and says, fearfully and wonderfully made. And you need to wake up every day and say, God, your works are wonderful, and I'm part of it. God, your works are wonderful, and I know that full well. No one can take it. No, I can't lose it. No one can take it from me in this moment. Your works are wonderful above all else. And so David can go into the dip. David can come into the spot in his life of struggle, of hardship. And the reason why David is willing to be the captain here and the captain here, the reason why David is willing to keep going when he doesn't have the enthusiasm and excitement that he started with, when he doesn't have the celebration that he started with, is because he knows he is in the dip. He is not the dip. He is in the struggle. He is not the struggle. The struggle of your life does not change your status. The difficulties that you go through do not change your worth. Your great accomplishments and your lack of accomplishments do not change your inherent value. So start where you are. Wherever that is, don't forfeit the race because you don't like where you started. Don't quit on the race that you are called to run because you dislike your lane. Because when God sees you, He did not create you by accident. He did not make a mistake. You have made mistakes. He did not make a mistake. And you may feel in crisis. You may feel in struggle. And the crisis may not be anything urgent in this moment. It may simply be that you don't know what to do with this moment. Because every moment feels the same. Every difficulty feels the same. Every day feels like a grind. And David looks at others and he says, I'll be the captain. And it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if others deem you valuable. It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks, because I know the value that God has upon your life, because I know the value that God has upon my life. And so parents, be the captain of your unruly, discontent children in this season. Homeowners, be the captain for your neighbors who are scared, who are lonely, who are isolated. Students who feel like this season has been taken from you and there's nothing you can do about it. Start where you are. We lose our fear by serving others. We lose our fear, not simply by trusting in God, but by following in the ways that he has set out for us. And what this world needs right now is we need faith, but we also need people who are willing to live out that faith by being champions for those around you. And what you may have heard all your life is all of these reasons why you can't do what others do. All of these reasons why you can't accomplish what others accomplish. All these reasons in which why you can't have courage in the way in which others have courage. And the voices may not simply come from those around you. The voice may come from within your own head. And it may be what they say. And it may be what you say. But I want to tell you today in the kindest way I possibly can. It doesn't matter what they say. And it really doesn't matter what you say. See, we did this thing. We named our children. And we had this unique way of naming our children. Bethany would suggest a name, and then I figured that the majority of the way that I would be saying that name would be screaming it. So she would suggest a name, and then I'd start screaming it about 5 times in a row. And if I could tolerate the name after screaming it 5 times in a row, we go, okay, yeah, that's good. That's good. We'll name it. We named our kids. They didn't have a say. They didn't get a choice. Like, we don't even give them choices as to what they're going to eat for dinner. They're going to eat whatever we set out before them because that's what we told them that they were going to eat. And they certainly didn't get a choice on what their name was. We named them because we created them. We named them. We have naming rights because we created them. You were created. And God has naming rights on your life. It doesn't matter what they say. It doesn't matter what you say. It matters what he says. And what he says in this moment is you are his child. You are created. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. And if you know that full well today, celebrate that this morning in this moment. Say, it matters what he says. It matters what he says. It doesn't matter what they say. It doesn't matter even what I say. It matters what he says above all else. Amen. Let me pray for you this morning. Heavenly Father, I pray for each and every one of us. I pray that in this moment of difficulty that calling would occur. That our crisis may feel like we're just barely getting through the day, but I believe calling will occur, that we will find newfound levels of purpose, newfound levels of meaning, newfound levels of significance and sacrifice and service in our lives. And it comes from this, that we know that we are loved by the Almighty God. That we know that you have put a purpose on our lives and that we are not here by accident. That we know that you said that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, and that we are your works, and that your works are wonderful. That we are wonderful. And anytime, God, we feel not enough, we feel inadequate, we feel insignificant, we feel like it doesn't matter, we feel like we lack courage. Let us not worry about what they say. Let us not worry about what we say. Let us remember what you say, because you, Lord, have naming rights on our lives. And we pray all this in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen. Amen.